shod by a farrier that comes for different horses here, but he's not the farrier that usually works on Chase, because Chase had thrown a shoe, and my regular appointment with my farrier was not going to be for another week and a half, and this horse is a thoroughbred, and he really can't go more than 12 hours before he's lame. So I definitely was not going to be able to let him go for a week and a half without a shoe. So I had reached out to my farrier, and he was busy or was unable to respond. So this other farrier happened to be coming to my barn anyway, and he does things like this for me when it comes to just like tacking on a shoe, because he threw a shoe and he happened to be coming to the barn anyway. So it's never been an issue to ask him to help out with, a horse that my farrier is unable to get to. So it wasn't unusual for me to ask him to help me out. So anyway, but what my thing is that I had a different farrier on my horse yesterday than I usually do. And my current farrier, my normal farrier, and I have worked with this horse since he arrived about 3 years ago. And during his time here, we've learned all his triggers that put him kind of in a PTSD fight mode. And, kind of learned what parts of his body to stay away from and what parts of his body he's okay with you engaging with. And he's come a long way, but he still has his triggers, and especially when the person handling him is a new person to him. So that's actually kind of cool to see is, okay, so I work through his triggers, and he trusts me to do certain things to him. That doesn't mean that some stranger coming to work with him or around him was going to have the same trust or the same level of, overriding his need to react to something. So anyway, as we were working with him, Chase was he was okay with his front feet, he wasn't really being bad with his front feet. And then we got to his hind feet. And when we got to, the only thing I knew to warn this farrier about was he's going to show you, he's got one white pastern marking. And I said, so I know that he always kind of shows you as like, somebody with a gun on their side, showing you, hey, I got this if I've got to use it kind of thing. So he always shows that foot. That's his weapon of exposure. That's what he wants to show you. And so I warned him about that. I said, well, when we get to the back feet, you're going to see that he's going to show you that. I said, but it's all talk. He's not going to act on it. Don't worry, And not really, I don't think I said don't worry, because I never say that. Like, you never tell somebody your dog won't bite, Like, you don't know what your dog's going to think of that person. But I did say, he has this quirk and this is what he does. And for the most part, it's just for show, but just to be warned that he's going to swish his tail and pick that foot up, and he's going to show it to you. He's going to lift it under himself. Not real high, not like to his belly to where he's ready to torque it out, but to where he's going to definitely let you know that there's a weapon on his person. He goes to that back foot, and on his way back there, he rubs down Chase's back and down his butt and goes to that back foot, and Chase picked it up a little bit more aggressively than he usually does. And then, kind of yanked it away, and, there were some behaviors that were coming out that actually were new to me. Like, he had never even done some of the things he was doing. Like, he shot the stand down the aisle, and both of us, this trainer and this farrier and I are both trainers, so we know better than to laugh at this kind of behavior. But it was quite funny because it was like I don't know what game where you shoot something, curling. He like shot this thing down the aisle, like with some serious momentum. He got it down the aisle, probably halfway down the aisle, in just a quick, kick. His foot was on it, and he just shot it behind him. So anyway, here we are laughing at it, and then we're laughing at ourselves because we really had no business laughing at that. That was bad behavior. But anyway, so he goes, gets his stand, and he comes back, and he puts his hand on Chase's rump, and goes to get going again, and runs his arm down, and runs his arm across his back and down his hindquarters, and starts trying to talk to him and go for the foot, and Chase is being even more defensive about the foot, and and I'm like, man, he's really never been this bad. I'm sure a farrier hears that all the time. Oh, he's never this bad. Where the truth of it is usually the horse is that bad. But I think Mike did trust that I was saying, this is new. This extreme behavior is new. So we get to the next foot. We get through that, which was a struggle. And we get to the next foot, and he does the same thing. He puts his arm up on his back, and he runs his arm down his rump and goes for the foot, and Chase is now threatening that foot. And that was way new. Like that, he doesn't normally threaten that foot at all. Even when you're on that's the opposite side of that white foot, he always picks the white foot up, even if there's no way he can get you with it because you're on the other side of him. He shows you that foot. So the fact that he picked up the other foot, I was like, oh, like he's truly threatening him. What's going on here? And we wrestled and we had our little bit of time with him with that, and he shot the stand out from there, and at one point I think he even kind of gave a little bit of a kicking gesture, but he hadn't really committed to it. But it was enough for me to go, what is going on? Like, he really has never been this bad. So Mike asks, what do you do to praise him or reward him when he does do something you do like? And I said, oh, well, in this horse's case, he doesn't like to be touched anywhere but his forehead. So a normal reward would be like I'd scratch him on the wither or something, but this horse in particular doesn't like being touched. So the only place he really accepts as reward or as affection is touching him on his face, on his forehead. And he goes, oh. He said, well, so then me going around and scratching his butt as thinking I'm rewarding him for being good is actually triggering him to be bad. And I said, wow, I felt stupid because why didn't I think of that? I was watching him do that and not thinking anything of it. You know what I mean? Like, I watched him run his arm down the horse's backside. I watched him put his arm over his back. And I'm thinking to myself, why didn't I realize that that's what he was doing? He was triggering Chase to be defensive, because when Chase first got here, he had pitchfork marks, 3 sets of distinctive pitchfork marks in his butt. So somebody stabbed him with a pitchfork at least 3 times prior to him getting here. He was leaning in the trailer, and the shipper had contacted me, on his travels and said, well, he's traveling really well other than he's leaning and he's starting to rub his tail. He said, I did at one of my stops go in with the intention of wrapping his tail. He said, but he threatened to kick me, so he said, I'm sorry, I didn't wrap his tail. And I didn't know this about this horse. This horse was new to me, coming from not a match situation, and I didn't know enough about him, so I was like, ooh, good to know. And then I was thinking to myself, this is just a shipper trying to sound like a good guy. He probably saw that it was happening, but could care less, and was just going to let me know that he knew it was happening. But, well, when he got here, I'm going to redeem this shipper in that statement right there. But when he got here, we got the horse off the trailer, and he goes, here, let me show you what I meant about his tail. And as soon as he went past the rib cage to the flank, Chase bent himself in half and turned his tail right at the guy. And the guy, when the guy stepped back, knowing, my bad, dude, I'm not coming back here, whatever, I was like, wow, okay. So not only did the shipper redeem himself in my negative belief that he was just talking himself up, legitimately my horse just showed me that what he said really was what happened. And also, we learned, that something about his hindquarters is he's protective. So here we are working around this horse that I've had for 3 years. I've gotten to the point to where when I first got him, you couldn't groom him past his wither, and even halfway down his neck, you would start to get the reaction. So there was a lot of approach and retreat to teach him how to be groomed. The chiropractor had come out because he had such a bad attitude. I wanted to make sure that he wasn't just in pain. So that way, because I don't believe you can train pain, so that way we made sure that he didn't have any underlying physical issues that were causing him to have this attitude problem before I went to actually doing behavioral corrections for him. And when the chiropractor got to the withers, we started to have issues, and then she discovered an old injury, a broken rib, an old injury. It didn't still hurt him, he was just protective of it. And she said that, that this isn't hurting him now, but he's definitely protective of it. And he threatened several times to kick, and then finally he kicked the box she was standing on and knocked her off the box. And she said she didn't feel comfortable trying to continue on because now it's from that point back to the back hindquarters. So she didn't feel comfortable. I took a month after she left, working on all his triggers, figuring out what triggers him, figuring out what puts him into a happy place, which is like a meditative state, and then what happens before he comes out of that state, and how he comes out of that state. So like I have another horse that goes into a happy place. He goes into like a catatonic, kind of a meditative state. And then when he comes out, he wakes up like his life is in danger. And he wakes up like a ghost is standing over him, like, and then runs for the world. This horse wakes up duking it out, like that person that you're afraid to wake up out of a sleep because they're going to wake up swinging. That's him. He wakes up swinging. So we wanted to make sure that I could get him through all of those triggers and how to know when he's getting into that meditative state, and if we can stop him from going there, we can stop him from fighting his way out. And a month later, she came back. She was able to do his entire body all over again, his tail, the whole 9 yards. And she was very pleased with the progress that I had made in learning the horse. I didn't fix anything. I just learned the horse, and I learned how to approach and retreat him until we could get something done. And I learned, when he starts to, his eyes go almost like into a thinking position, like his eyes obviously stay visible, but you could tell that he disappeared out of his eyes, and then he'll gradually start pulling his chin to his chest, and if he can get into a really bent pole position, he's already gone. And now you got to be careful. Now you got to really step back and just wait for him to work it out. If you stay engaged with him and he's put himself in that position, when he does come out, he's coming out swinging. So we've learned that about him. So anyway, he didn't get in that position yesterday. He just got madder and madder and madder, but he stayed present. And maybe that's why I wasn't clicking that he was having a problem. But when Mike asked me, how do I reward this horse, I was just like, wow, that, because Mike's a trainer also, so that was really a cool thing for a trainer to ask you, and cool thing for a farrier to ask you too. And I think it's important that maybe all farriers learn to ask that kind of stuff, because it might make people aware of something they haven't been realizing was happening. So we didn't realize that he was triggering that behavior by touching him the way Chase just doesn't want to be touched. Now also, Chase doesn't know this guy, so he's being touched in a way he doesn't want to be touched by a man, which could be a problem also, and by a man he doesn't know. So all those elements could have been factors. As soon as we clicked what was going on, as soon as we realized it's because you're touching him in an area that he does not like to be touched by anybody, and probably not by a strange man, boom, different horse. And it was funny too, because at one point he reached up to touch him, and he's like, oh, and he pulled back, and it was good, because it's also, I respect that, because, sometimes when you do things habitually, especially like in your field of work, it's hard to break yourself of something that you would normally just do. And for him to catch himself before he put his arm on him again was great, because, like I said, once we figured out what's going on, he was fine. He was his normal self. And we were able to successfully finish. Now, he'd gotten himself so worked up during this shoeing process that I don't let horses misbehave and earn reward for misbehaving. Now I'm going to make them work for reward. So I do like grandpa walk. I'm sure people, if you've ever watched any of my videos, you know I do grandpa walk with my horses, which means I literally take a step, they take a step. I take a step, they take a step. I don't, and then sometimes I walk fast, sometimes I stop, sometimes I back up. And I want my horse, I can do this, and I want my horse to take a step forward, take a step back, take a step forward, take a step back, as I do. They have to mirror me. That's a game, but it's also a way for him to redeem himself for the way he had behaved, to where when I turn him out, he can get the reward of being turned out. I was not going to just let him loose from having had that kind of farrier experience. As I was bringing him and doing that exercise with him, he actually, because he had himself so wound up, he was like a shaken soda, I was almost aggravating it. And at one point, he actually threatened to cow kick me. And when he did that, that was way new. That he has never done, is threaten to kick me when I was beside him. I immediately turned around, corrected it, backed him up, and sternly spoke to him. No physical abuse or of any way, just got in front of him and put energy in front of him and forced him backwards with my energy, not with anything. I didn't hit him. So he went backwards. I took a breath, invited him back up to beside me, and we walked. We did the grandpa walk. We backed up, and of course now he's performing it properly because he was corrected for having done it with an attitude problem. And what was really neat, and I wish I hadn't interrupted, bad habit of mine, what was really neat was listening to Mike tell the owner of the next horse we were going to do that that was a sign of a really good trainer. So this was a compliment he was paying me to one of my clients who I work with her horse. So he didn't have to sell me to her, which was even cooler if you think about it. Was saying, that's a sign of a really good trainer. Something happened, a correction was made, and then they moved on. She didn't hold a grudge. She didn't, continue to go after the horse for something. She corrected what he did, and then she moved on and went back to doing what she was doing with the same attitude that she had if the horse had not misbehaved. And I interrupted and well, of course you can't hold a grudge, and stupid me. I should have just kept taking, spending a little time hearing my praises being sang to somebody that, it matters if she thinks I'm a good trainer as well, and I respect him as a trainer because although I've never seen him train a horse, our conversations when he is here have always been common conversations. They're not where I walk away going, yeah, you idiot. I don't have those thoughts at all. We have very constructive conversations on the training level, on a training subject. So I think we think much alike when it comes to training. So it was neat to hear kind words, validating words, I guess, from another trainer to my client about whether or not I was a trainer he would respect. So that's kind of cool. People don't do that anymore. It's such a competitive field. Everything's a competitive field. How you walk out of your house and how you're dressed today is a competitive field. You can see I don't care. But yeah, I had a really, really interesting day yesterday. And my point is that don't become so complacent with your horse's needs. My horse needed me to know what was wrong. And until he asked me, how do I reward this horse when he is doing a good thing, it didn't trigger what was going wrong. And like I said, I saw, I had a mental awareness of him running his arm down this horse's backside, and not for a second did it click that was what was going wrong. So know your horses, and even when you know your horses, be so present in a circumstance that you know what you're forgetting about your horse, and try to always be there to help your horse through things that, even if it's not normally rearing its ugly head anymore, it could, again, if the circumstances were just enough out of whack for your horse to put him back in that protective mode. Because that's all that was happening, is he was off balance emotionally, he was off balance mentally, he was a new person, he was doing things to him that he didn't like, and, it could have been all kind of, he could have smelt like somebody that's abused him. You don't know, so always be there for your horse, and always know what your horse, like what you've learned your horse needs from you, and always be ready to supply the support and offer the education to other people that are around him before he just gets in trouble for stuff. Like, I was starting to be like, hey, and I'm not like that with my horses. So the fact that I was, in a way, kind of losing my patience with my horse by starting to change the tone of my voice, it was not effective, because now I'm making it worse. Now I'm yelling at my horse for something that he was doing just kind of automatically in defense for himself. I was not being an advocate for him, so he had to be an advocate for himself. And me getting more mad about it almost elevated the situation. So, and me getting mad is just changing the tone of my voice. I wasn't like freaking out on my horse or, abusing my horse in any way, but my tone changed, which made it more uncomfortable for my horse. And I think, if anything, it just made it worse. And then once we figured out what the deal was, it was like, boom, here Chase is again, the Chase that I've worked so hard to create. Know your horse, know his quirks, know what he needs from you, be an advocate for him. Don't ever forget what your horse needs. Don't ever forget what your horse struggles with, and basically go back, figure out what's going wrong instead of just assuming that they're being a jerk. The other horse that we worked with, she's got lack of education issues, and she was being really, really bad. I give him so much credit for working with her, because, at one point she was just being so bad that, if he wasn't a good farrier, he'd be like, I'm done, find somebody else. And I'm so appreciative that he's still willing to work with her, because it's important to me to fix this. I've been available now, this was the third time I've been available to try to help. Now it's going to be my goal. I put my other horse on his service, so now, and he's going to be done the same day that this horse will be done. So now I will always be here to help with that other horse, and I'm going to start videotaping her sessions, because she's that bad. In fact, we even talked about, which I thought was kind of cool, because he was like, wow, that's pretty neat. Like, I mentioned, we were talking about horses that have to be tranked for the farrier, and I'm like, oh yeah, like some people ace their horses, and he goes, ace? That's how many, whatever, and he's telling me about this other drug, and he's like, and I'm like, well, I don't know. I said, I've never had to